I'm Don Bacon, and it's such a pleasure to be representing the second district. Uh, the average staff in Washington, D.C., they average 2% veterans. Our office has 35% veterans. So we have a huge veteran contingent. And with me today is Dan Frazee, who served in the Air Force. And I want to ask Dan to talk a little bit about his Air Force career and how did 9/11 impact his life. So Dan, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you very much, Congressman, and thank you for your service. Yeah, I was in the Air Force from 2003 to 2010. I did a one-year tour to Iraq, working counterinsurgency and counterterrorism there in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. When I experienced 9/11, I was a junior in high school, and I remember coming into my sociology teacher's class. He would always have the news playing on in the morning. It was my first class of the day, and at the time I got in, I remember the picture on the television screen. You know, one of the planes had impacted the World Trade Center at that time. So you saw smoke billowing out of the building, and the news anchors were kind of trying to get a hold of the situation, saying, is this an accident? What happened here? And other students started to kind of trickle in, and we were talking amongst each other, looking at, watching the news kind of nonchalantly, and then and I remember looking up at the screen, and at that moment, the second plane hit the building. And there was just this feeling of, dread. I felt, the hair on my neck, stand up, and I remember this feeling that we're under attack.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time probably in my life that I felt scared. But I came from a family. My mom served in the military. Both my grandfathers served in the military. And I made up my mind pretty much at that point that I wanted to serve my country and prevent something like this from happening again.
That second building exploding was the big light that went off in my brain too. There was no doubt we were under attack. Mm-hmm. And did you happen to remember the speech from President Bush that night?
Mm-hmm. I didn't listen to it at the time. I was 16 years old, I think. But I remember talking about the event with my parents when I got home. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to make sure we were okay. And actually the school had, the principal had come over the intercom and told all of us that, you're free to go home, if your parents, come and pick you up, that kind of thing. And there was just a feeling that this was a very significant event, in our country, and that we could talk about it with our folks, which I did when I got home. Yeah.
It's important for folks to remember that, Afghanistan, the Taliban provided safe haven for Al-Qaeda, which enabled them to attack our country with those 4 airplanes that they hijacked. Only 3 hit the targets. Mm-hmm. But it's important to know that the Taliban today are still allied with Al-Qaeda, and we're still in a fight with them in Afghanistan. I would say, thankfully, our strategy has changed to where we have a minimum presence in Afghanistan now, as small as we can have it, 8,000 troops. And our whole goal is to train and to provide the backbone to the Afghan forces, and they're doing all the fighting. And our whole goal is to prevent the Taliban from taking back over and bringing back in Al-Qaeda and giving them a safe harbor again, which would likely mean more attacks down the road against our allies in our country. And so this is still a remnant of what we're having to deal with even today. And but go ahead.
Well, I remember one of your top priorities coming into office was to boost our military to really recover from some of the funding cuts that had happened earlier. So can you talk a little bit about your work on the NDAA?
Right.
And
So in 2017 in January when we came in, our military fought in Afghanistan, was still fighting there, and Iraq. We had the issues with Syria, with ISIS having a third of Syria. We had Libya, that President Obama before that took us in there. All of that going on while we were cutting the military, which we cut them about 18% roughly. And then we were still having to retool our military for Russia and China, which we were falling behind in our modernization. And from that, our military is at the lowest readiness since 1977. Half our Navy aircraft couldn't fly. 58 combat brigades in the Army, only 3 could deploy. It was really broken. And so what we've done is we've restored about 60% of the cuts that occurred under President Obama. And we've put more focus now on China and Russia because they are what we call it near competitors. Their power is rising. And we're having to pivot a little bit. We're having to pivot away from strictly counterinsurgencies and counterterrorism, which is what we were doing. And so we've had to repivot our military to ensure that we can deter against China and Russia. And that's really been our work the last 3.5 years. And I think we've made huge strides and a great progress in that effort, but the work's not done.
And you've been working on a bipartisan basis with a caucus that you were one of the co-founders. Can you tell us a little bit about the Four Country Caucus?
Well, I think you and I share this experience when you're in the military. You don't know who's a Republican, you don't know who's a Democrat. When you're solving a problem, you don't care what party affiliation people are. We wanted a little more of that culture in Congress. So we put a caucus together. We have 21 members, 11 Democrats, 10 Republicans. I'm the co-chair. And our focus is to solve problems from a national, patriotic perspective, not a Republican or a Democrat perspective. So we're trying to find areas where we can cooperate, put Republicans and Democrats on the same bills so we can get things done. And one of our focus areas right now is national service, voluntary service. We want to give more opportunities for 18-year-olds to serve their country, not just the military, perhaps the Peace Corps, perhaps the Health Corps. But we know when people serve their country, they get out of their parochial, maybe their small town, wherever they may be, and start to have a little more of an American perspective and realize how great our country is. And we can put petty politics to the side and remember that we live in the greatest country in the world and that we need to defend it.
Absolutely. I remember working with other service members, different components as well, but from Texas, California, New York, all over, and then even working with some of our allies overseas in the UK and Romanians and Australians. So anyway, thank you very much, sir.
Well, we appreciate Dan Frazee and your years of service in the Air Force. We're proud to have you in the office.
Thank you, sir.